Welcome to Widowed Too Soon, where real-life widows and widowers come together to share their stories of survival, faith, and the journey of finding hope in the darkest of times. Whether you're newly widowed or have been on this journey for some time, each week we're here to provide you with inspiration, practical advice, and the reassurance that you are not alone. You were made to not only survive, but thrive. And now here's your host, a woman who has walked this path herself, who finds solace in writing, joy in speaking, and freedom in dancing like nobody's watching. Michelle Bader Ebersole.
Welcome to Widow Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole coming back at you with another guest interview. I know you guys are loving these. It's been so much fun as we've transitioned to more and more interviews, and I'm very excited. I have a new friend with me today, Christine Odour, and Christine and I met through, I think, our Widow Too Soon page. Is that right, where we first met and you found out it was a podcast?
Yeah.
Listened to it, reached out, and we got to know each other just a little bit. But today I'm going to get to hear your full story and hear all the great things you've done. So Christine, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Good. And tell us where in the world you are coming from.
I am coming from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
So amazing. I love it. I love that. I love how we are literally all over the world interviewing people. It's so, so fun. So we're going to get to know a lot more about you. So we're just going to dive right in. So let's start with, tell us about your late husband and how you met him and what life was like. I'm so excited to hear this.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's always a pleasure to talk about him. But thanks again, Michelle, for having me on your
welcome.
podcast. It's just an honor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so a little bit about my late husband. His name was Kefa, Kefa Oduor.
Okay.
So his middle name was Oduor, and that's what I picked up.
Got it.
Yeah. So we met in 1992, way back. I hope I'm not revealing my age.
I'm like, you don't look that old. You look so young. That's great.
Yeah, we were at the university.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were at Kenyatta University. That was in Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so both of us were from Kenya. And so we did meet at the university. And it was interesting because when we met, we just met at a fellowship. We used to go to a navigators fellowship. We had navigators.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So they had a base in the Kenyatta University campus, and so they organized fellowships for students. So I went, and that's where I spotted Kefa. I mean, I just saw him.
You spotted him.
I know, because he was tall and he was dark and he was handsome.
Right.
And I didn't think much about him at that point. Just like, oh, that's a nice, lovely, handsome guy. He was warm, very, he talked to people. He interacted so warmly with people. So I didn't think much about it after that. And we just continued with school and everything, university. I was actually in another relationship, but wasn't very serious. But towards 1995, thereabout, that's when things started turning around, because we had just been friends.
Right.
And nothing serious. But then somehow something just started to click. And this other relationship I was in ended. And so Kefa was such a good friend. Like, I could talk to him about literally anything. And he was so supportive, even with my program back then in school. I was taking a Bachelor of Arts in Fine Art.
Okay.
And I would have to haul around a lot of art material back and forth from the studio to my room. So he would help me with all that. And so we built such a good friendship. And around 1995 is when I started, just something clicked, and I was like, no, I started seeing him in a different light. And of course, he was interested all along. And he says,
Yeah.
from the first time he saw me, he was like, that's going to be my wife. But he
Wow.
never told me, he never
Oh.
pushed anything. He was just so calm about it. Yeah. So that's how we started. That's how we started dating. And we graduated in 1996. And of course, took our relationship even deeper. Then he proposed,
Aw.
and we got married in 1998.
Okay. And that was
Hmm.
in Kenya? Did you get
In
married in
Kenya,
Kenya?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then tell us what your life was like when you were married.
Oh, it was amazing. Kefa was such a lovely, lovely human being.
Mm,
He was everything you'd want in a guy.
yeah.
Like he didn't have any qualms of like helping around the house, which was huge for me because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like doing
No,
housework.
me neither.
So
Totally hear you.
he was so good at that, and he helped around the house. He loved cooking.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me to cook a few dishes, like he I would say he was a better cook than I was way
Mm-hmm.
back then. And so, he warmed my heart in that sense, and he was very supportive. He took interest in everything I did, and um he was just the outgoing person in our relationship. He was the
Mm-hmm.
extrovert. Let me put it that way. He was the
Yeah.
sanguine. I was melancholy. Just yeah. It was a good blend. And so he made it so easy to interact with other people
Mm.
because he was the kind who would just come talk to you and say, "Hey, Michelle, how you doing today?" And
Right.
I'm still fumbling with, okay, what should I
Right.
say? What should I say?
Right. He was natural at that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was natural at that. So we started life. We got our kids. Our first son, Jonathan,
Oh,
was born in 2000,
okay.
and Kefa was a great dad.
I'm
Amazing,
sure.
totally. Like he did everything. He washed the babies. He changed the diapers, and
Nice.
then Matthew came along for 4 years after, and
Okay.
still the same thing. I remember one time I had to travel when after Matthew was born, and Matthew was about 3 months. I had to go to Dubai
Oh, wow.
for about a week, and that was the first time I was leaving my little baby,
Yeah.
and I was so worried. But he said, "Why are you worried? I'm here," you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt guilty, but yeah, he
Yeah.
was he was that kind of dad. He could do anything with the kids.
Wow. And what did he do for work?
He was a marketer. So
Okay.
initially, he at the university he did Bachelor of Education in French. So
Wow.
he majored in French. So we spoke a little bit of French
Uh-huh.
together. That was our love language, and when we didn't want the kids to hear what we were
Right.
saying. um, but he didn't go into teaching. He went on to do his masters, and he did his masters and majored in marketing. And
Okay.
so he took on more of a marketing career.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And you were home with the kids, or did you have another job too, or what was that like?
I initially, so before we got married, after university, I worked a little bit. Then I stopped working, and then I got a job again after the wedding, and so that job was a nonprofit, so it kind of came to
Mm.
an end. With nonprofit, when funding ends,
Mm-hmm.
projects end. So I jumped into a family business. My mom had started
Oh.
a flower business, and she was relocating and needed someone to run it. So I just jumped on. I said,
Okay.
"Look, I have artistic skills.
Yeah.
I can put my skills to practice here." And so that's what I did. I took on the flower business and ran it for about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
So
And I'm so curious how you got to Calgary from Kenya. Like, what brought you to where you are now? Or maybe you're getting to that. It's
I'm
part of
getting
your story. Oh, okay. Sorry, I won't jump ahead.
that's okay. So anyway, yeah, we worked together Kefa helped a lot with the marketing pieces
Oh, that's
because
great. Yeah.
he was so good at talking to people, and anybody he talked to would end up buying flowers. Like, just, I don't know how he did it. He just had this magic. And so he was a co-director in that sense. And so around 2014, actually in 2006, someone had talked to us about Canada. And we were very interested, and we started the application. And then it took so long. And so we were like, this is taking too long. Just, we can't put our lives on hold for this.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Forget about this. Withdrew that application and just continued with life. But then in 2014, I just started feeling the urge, like I'm not very comfortable. I was getting burnt out from, the work I was doing. I had done
Yeah.
it for so long, running this flower business. I never had any time for myself. I was just go, 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 go. And so I felt like I needed to slow down, and I needed to transition into something I could do well into my later years. So alongside that, Kefa and I we served in our church, and we served in the family ministry. So we ran premarital classes
Okay.
together. We call them Doa, which means marriage. And so we facilitated some of those classes together with other couples, and that really inspired. Like, it just put a passion in me. It planted a
Yeah.
seed in me that this is what I want to do: just work with people, help people. And I wanted to take this to a professional level. So I decided to go back to school
Okay.
and get my master's in counseling psychology.
Oh, great.
So that's how we ended up in Canada.
Okay. So when you moved to Canada, you started your master's, or was it before that?
So, so we moved to Canada in 2015,
Okay.
and Kefa's brother lived in um, down south of Alberta, but in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
That's the province that's right next door to
Yeah.
Alberta. So he encouraged me to. He said, if you're going to do your master's, just like, first of all, start, if you're coming as a family, come in, first go to one of the community colleges so you have an easier transition.
Yeah.
And then once you settle down as a family, then you can go into your master's when you figured out where you want to be. Because I had thought I'd go to BC. I didn't like the snow. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, British Columbia has no snow. I think that's where I want to be. So I had to change things around. And so we ended up a little city down south of Alberta. It's called Medicine Hat. And it was just 2 hours away from where Kefa's brother lived.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had family in that sense, and I started with a diploma in child and youth care counseling,
Okay.
and I thought that's gonna be a soft landing for me, and we'll get the whole family settled because I wasn't coming alone. I said, if we're coming to school, we're all coming as a family. So
Right.
Kefa and the boys were all bundling ourselves, and we're gonna move together, and that's what we did. So after I graduated with that diploma, I got a job. We were actually thinking of moving to a bigger city here in Alberta. But then around September, Kefa started getting some tremors on his left leg.
Okay.
And we're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it just kept, like his leg would just twitch and, just like it looked like muscle spasms, and they would come and go. And so like, okay, maybe it's stress, maybe it's fatigue. Let's slow down. We tried massage. I would dip his leg in warm water with Epsom
Yeah.
salts and just massage it, and that wasn't helping. So he
Yeah.
went to see the family doctor, he was referred to a neurologist, but the neurologist took so long to get back because the way Canada works, we have a universal healthcare system.
Right.
And so when you see the doctor, you have to get a referral to see a specialist. You can't just walk in. So it took a bit of time for the specialist to get
Right.
back to us. So Kefa had to go back to, he went to the emergency room and like, this is getting worse. I'm not comfortable. He had to, his leg by this time was becoming weak. And his foot started dropping and he couldn't lift it like the other foot. It was just so like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so by the time he went to ER and they referred him to a different neurologist, that neurologist called him about within a week. By that time, Kefa's leg had gone down, so he couldn't even stand on it. Like
Wow.
he could stand, but barely. He had to get a walking stick. Like
Wow.
this was so scary for us, like seeing him use a cane. Like, what is this?
Right.
So the day he went to see the neurologist, he looked at him and sent him straight to the ER, to the hospital,
wow.
and said, you need to go and do some tests. And had him do a CT scan. And that day, he got the CT scan. I didn't go with him because I thought, oh, these are just routine tests.
Right.
He's going to come back. He just called me and said, hey, Christine, guess what? They found a mass in my brain.
Wow.
And I'm not allowed to leave the hospital. I'm not allowed to drive.
Wow. What a shock.
So he was like, you need to come as soon as you can. I didn't even know what was going on. I was like, what is this? What's a mass? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
So I got a few friends from our life group, some friends we were doing, who are in church together. We have this small group. And they took me to the hospital. And we sat there with Kefa and we're trying to figure out, okay, what are they saying? The doctor came in and the doctor said he needs to get an MRI. They are suspecting it could be a tumor, but they want to confirm that with an MRI, in which case he would need to be rushed to Calgary, which was the bigger city that had the facility to do that kind of treatment. And so that night they said, just once we get a bed, he's out of here and we're going to fly him to Calgary. And sure enough, the next day they did the MRI. They said it was a tumor. Of course, they weren't sure whether it's benign or malignant, but they said he needs to get to Calgary for surgery immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, that's where our lives just stopped.
Yeah. I mean, complete shock, right? You had no clue, why this was happening. And then to go to, it's a mass. So they did the scan, the MRI, and then that's when they found out it was malignant, and they found out it was cancer right after that.
So they did the MRI, and then he was flown to Calgary the next day.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't allowed to. No, actually, was he flown or he was driven? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like everything was happening so fast. I just remember saying goodbye to him in an ambulance. And I was told I couldn't travel with him.
Wow.
So they actually were taking him to the airport. I think they were going to fly him.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
But he got to Calgary. It's a 3-hour drive from Medicine Hat to Calgary.
Okay.
So I was just left there saying goodbye to him in an ambulance. I was like, I was so shocked. I was like, what does this mean?
Right.
what does this mean? So I just prepared myself to travel as fast as I could. I had to make sure that somebody was there to be with the boys,
Yeah.
and got to Calgary the next day. And he was already in the hospital, one of the big facilities here in Calgary. And now it was like, okay, what's next? What's going on? We did get connected to a neurosurgeon. He was the one to do the surgery. He was a very, very nice doctor. Such a lovely guy. He explained everything to us. He told us that what the tumor Kefa had was called a glioblastoma.
Oh, I do know one of my really good friends, her husband died of that. So I've heard of that. Wow.
Yeah, and it's a very aggressive tumor.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty tumor,
Mm-mm.
honestly. He didn't know, like he couldn't say whether, of course, he couldn't say if it's benign or malignant, but he said he gave us options either to do like a biopsy to find out if it's benign or malignant, or just go straight into surgery, have it resected, and then do the biopsy at that point. And we said, just go and have it removed.
Yeah.
Let's just have this thing removed. Let's get our lives back to normal. Just get it out and let's get this done with, you know.
Yeah.
It took a whole week to get the surgery done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there were just so many emergencies at the hospital, and he kept being bumped and bumped and bumped, like tomorrow. So finally they did the surgery, and it was so successful. Like, for that kind of tumor, I guess it's because of where the tumor was situated. It was right here in the frontal lobe of his brain. And so that's why it was affecting mobility on his left side. So the way the brain works is everything on the right controls the left side, and everything on the left controls the right side. So because the tumor was on the right side, was controlling, it had affected some of the nerves that control mobility on his left side, and that's why his left leg was compromised, and actually his left arm started getting weak as well. Okay. So it was actually eating more into those parts of the brain. So the neurosurgeon did a great job. He said he got the whole tumor out as far as his eyes could see. And we were like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Now our lives can go back to normal. What next? Okay. Chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Okay, just that? Okay, fine. We'll do that. Kefa was so upbeat. He was in high spirits. He was like, yeah. In fact, at the hospital, they were like, they've never seen someone so upbeat.
Wow.
And so positive. They thought that's why he was coming through so well. It was a nightmare, honestly, Michelle. That was like the darkest season of my life, honestly. After the surgery, we're allowed to go home because now home was 3 hours away, right?
Right.
So he couldn't start radiotherapy immediately. He had to come back after 4 weeks. So we were able to go home for Christmas. This was 2017. So we went home for Christmas, and in January now we were to go back to Calgary for treatment. So he was going to do radiotherapy and chemotherapy from Calgary. Yeah, that was tricky because we had the two boys and they were in school, and we couldn't get them out of school to be with us in Calgary. I had to shuttle between Calgary and Medicine Hat. We didn't even know anyone in Calgary.
Right.
So luckily a friend of ours from the church, she connected us to a lady in Calgary who was offering to host us when she heard that we were coming for treatment. So she agreed to host us.
Oh, that's nice.
And that was such a blessing, because then I didn't have to worry about housing.
Yeah.
Didn't have to worry about, food. The only challenge was that we had to go down to the basement. That's where we were staying. And Kefa could not go down the stairs very well because of his leg. That was such a challenge. So we figured out a way to get to the basement because they had an external door. And but he needed a lot of support, and that's where like my older son came in. He helped kind of like provide that support for him because he was still using the cane, and by this time he had also been given like a walker. So even though the tumor had been resected, his mobility was still compromised. Yeah. So we started doing the outpatient treatment, but then during one of the visits, because they always check like blood pressure, they check blood sugar, they just check your vitals to see how you're responding to the treatment. He was on a steroid that was to reduce inflammation in the brain.
Okay.
Because the area where the resection had been done, what had started swelling. And so they put him on this steroid, which just shot his blood sugar up.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. His blood sugar went to 36. I just remember we were planning to travel to Medicine Hat for the weekend and get the boys back to school, but we couldn't even travel. We were just told, you need to bring him back to hospital. He can't travel with that number of like the high sugars. So we a friend of ours came and took the boys back home, and I was left in Calgary with Kefa. He was admitted. They had to get him on all the diabetes medication because now that had sparked diabetes, literally.
Whoa.
Something we had not even been dealing with, Yeah, that was very painful. Yeah, that was painful. But he managed to get through the 6 weeks of radiotherapy and chemotherapy, and we were able to go back home. So going back home, all we needed to do was physiotherapy, just some kind of rehabilitation, get him back on his feet. And again, we were upbeat. We were just like, thank you, God, we've gotten through surgery, we've gotten through radiotherapy, we're still doing chemo. It's not stopped, but we had a break and we could do it from Medicine Hat. So like our lives are going to go back to normal now. Phew, just thank you, God. And this time, family and friends were all praying.
Right.
And and of course, we try the physiotherapy. He starts gaining a bit more mobility, but he still has to use the walker. And then unfortunately, he started getting some seizures on his left hand. And that again forced us to go back and like, what's going on? And then they do routine MRIs to just see what's going on in the brain. And after doing one of the second MRI, thereabouts in April, bad news, they found that the tumor was coming back, was growing again. And that's what was causing the seizures. Yeah. They were just partial seizures, so it was just mostly on his left side. But yeah, it was really upsetting for him. He was very uncomfortable. By this time, he had started feeling very fatigued. He was not as excited as he was with life. And it was just so hard on his body. The chemotherapy was taking a toll on him. And so around May, they stopped the chemotherapy. The oncologist just said, it's not doing him any good. And the neurosurgeon said the way the tumor was growing, it was not going to be possible to operate it again, to operate on him. And so he was sent to palliative care.
That's always a hard transition. I remember when we did that too, where the doctor says it's doing more harm than good. So it's time for quality of life now instead of trying to get better. And it's such a hard place to be because, like, no, I don't want to give up.
I know, I know. It's hard. It's like they're not giving you any positive, and here they
Right.
tell you as it is. Like,
Yeah.
in fact, the last visit with the oncologist, he was just so blunt.
It's
He
almost too
just
much. I
literally
hated going to
just,
oncologists. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He was so, I don't know. I don't know whether that's their training or it's just him, but he was just like, yep, you only have 6 months to live. And I thought he was just like, it was just sounded like someone telling you, within 6 months you'll be flying to the
Right.
US or
Right.
somewhere else, something like that. It
Right.
wasn't
Like
like
no emotion and
no
like no,
emotion.
yeah, that was my experience too. I'm so thankful for oncologists, but I think it's like they almost deal with it so much that they don't have the emotion left when they talk to you about it. So, yes, we had a very similar experience with, I think, two different oncologists
Oh dear. Yeah.
with the same kind of, yeah. They just, it kind of felt like they lacked empathy. They were just, yeah, it's just their job to tell you this is what it's like scientific. This is what you've got left.
I know
Oh,
there's no remorse. Like there's no, well, maybe, we don't know, but
right. There's none of that. It's
it's
just
like
like, nope, this
six
is what it
months.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we were told. 6 months also. Crazy. Mm.
Yeah, so of course, when I heard that, I was like, I refuse that. I refuse that. In
Yep.
Jesus' name, he's not dying. I don't even want to hear that.
Right. Exactly.
And so for me, I went back with a resolve to fight this
Yes.
thing. And I was so determined to fight for his life. I changed Kefa's diet, put him on a keto diet. Like I cut out sugar. I was
Yeah.
like,
You did all the stuff.
Kefa is not going anywhere. Like, no, 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 no. Like, honestly, if it was up to me, I think Kefa would be alive, but God knew it's not up to me,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and
Mm.
He knows why. But yeah, nobody wants to lose their spouse at 46
No. Or any age.
or any age.
Any age we never do.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys start on palliative care, and what happens after that?
So, yeah, of course, we go back to Medicine Hat, and home care is coming in to help with morning care and evening care. And I'm his, of course, primary caregiver. I manage his medication, and we still had to do a few appointments to the cancer clinic in Medicine Hat, and some physio. I did take him in for some physiotherapy before we had physio coming into the house. And once in a while, I'll take him also for massage, just to get his,
Yeah.
blood flowing, because he was not moving a lot. And yeah, we didn't have to drive again to Calgary once they put him on palliative. But we did try. A what do they call these things? A trial,
Oh, like a clinical
a
trial.
clinical
Yeah.
trial.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you try that?
We tried to get on some, but there wasn't any that were for
Okay.
his specific cancer, but I looked everywhere for them.
Yeah. So a friend of ours told us there's a doctor who was doing clinical trial for glioblastoma.
Oh.
And that was up in Edmonton, which was 6 hours away from Medicine Hat. And so I followed up, and we got to do a consult with the doctor, but we did this virtually first because he needed to see Kefa, see his range of motion, and also just get a little bit about his history to see whether he fits the requirements for the clinical trial.
Right.
And so he did say that based on what he saw, he fitted the first step. So the next step would be to drive to Edmonton and do some blood work, and if they found some certain things in his blood, then that would get him to the next
Okay.
stage. So we drove up to Edmonton. That was hard. That was
Yeah.
really hard, because by this time Kefa was on a wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was hard. And so we got there and they did the blood work, and of course we are so hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they said whatever they needed to find in his
Oh.
blood was not there, and so he didn't meet the criteria now to move to the
Oh,
next step.
disappointing.
That was such a blow. That was
Yeah.
such a blow. And so we just ended up going back, and I don't know. To me, I didn't resign to fate. I was so determined. I was like, this is a battle that we're gonna fight, and Kefa is not going anywhere. We're gonna overcome this. Unfortunately, around end of August, he had to go into hospice care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and at that time they called it a transition bed, because he had taken a few falls at home,
Oh,
and it was difficult to lift him because he
yeah, I'm
was
sure.
6 foot and he was
Yeah.
almost 200 pounds, and I just could not
Yeah.
get him up. So I had to get the EMS several times to the house to get him, to get him help, and that was so hard. And so by this time he was in hospital, they said instead of bringing him home, they'll take him to this transition bed at another facility, and if he does get better, he can come home. But I think they knew he was not going to get better.
Yeah.
And so from there, he was transitioned to hospice, which is just within the same building, the same, it's still the same floor. And so his mobility was even more challenged. By this time, he was what they call, when he went in, he was a 2-person assist. And by this time, he was a 3-person assist.
Okay.
So he couldn't move. They wouldn't let him even try to walk. They had to have 3 people come in and move him with a crane, transition him from the bed to the chair to the washroom. Yeah, it was hard. It was
And
very,
I'm
very
sure
hard.
it was heartbreaking watching your husband get to a place where he couldn't take care of himself. That's I can relate to that for, big strong man to then not being able to do what they want to do, and it's heartbreaking. So, that's so hard. So your hospice care was in a hospital. Our hospice care came to our house, but you had different needs. You guys had different needs that he needed people to take care of him. So how long was he in hospice then?
Um, until he passed.
So that was, you said August when he went there?
End of August.
Okay.
So, end of August, so around September, October, November, then December. He just before Christmas on the 19th is when he passed. Yeah.
How was he, like, emotionally and everything as he's going through these last few months? What was that like for you, for your boys?
That was hard because we had watched him now go down,
Right.
like really go down. His countenance was, very low. He didn't have the joy that he had,
Yeah.
before. And oh dear, it was just so hard for him at that time, and for us too, because watching him struggle like this was really painful. And for me, I know I was fighting so hard. I didn't let myself give in to any emotions at this point. I was like, we're gonna beat this thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how dark it looks and how
Right.
ugly it looks. we're gonna beat this. So I didn't have time to stop and and explore my emotions. Honestly, I was like on autopilot, and so I was just going and going. I was like, I was getting his meals done. I would prepare his keto diet, take it to the hospice, and I was still working. I was working
Wow.
part time, so it wasn't like full time.
But still,
So
it's
I'd
a
still
lot.
go to work, and I'd always have someone. If I had to go into work for 3 hours, I always had someone there to help me with him. So there are friends who stepped in
Yeah.
to to provide that support. At one time, I had to get like respite coming in as well. So it was just everything was going so fast that I
Yeah.
had no time to sit down and process
Right.
what was actually happening at an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
But now it was towards December that I realized that we might just need help, some professional help.
Mm.
So we got connected to a psychologist through our church. And of course, because Kefa couldn't move out, she was able to come to the facility
Oh.
and have a chat with us. Like the first session, all of us as a family, and then after that, we were now to do our own like individual
Mm.
sessions with her, just to get our support
Yeah. And
at individual level. So for myself and the boys.
how old were the boys at that time?
At that time, our oldest John was 18. He just turned 18 in September. Matthew just turned 14.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So this was a critical time in their lives
Yes.
as
Mm-hmm.
as adolescents, as teenagers.
Yes.
Jonathan, of course, was a young adult. So, and the worst part of it is that Jonathan he had just started grade 12 in September.
Mm.
And that was his last
Oh,
final year of high school.
right.
He
So
just did
hard.
not need to be going through this. So I tried to shield them from a lot of his day to day care, just have them continue with life as
Mm-hmm.
normal, go to school, do their activities. They played soccer. And so I had them just keep that as
Keep
much,
going. Yeah.
keep that as normal
Mm-hmm.
as possible, just so that there's not too much of an interruption.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kefa would come home, they would give him like a day pass. He
Okay.
would come home on Sundays because he really wanted to be home
Yes.
after at some point. But because of his care, I just couldn't handle him at
Right.
home alone. I couldn't turn him, I couldn't get him to the bathroom. Like it was just so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the day that he would come on Sunday, we would have a special transit vehicle that would allow him to just come on his wheelchair. And then we got a ramp that could get him into the house. And then we got a stair lift that would get him
Oh, wow.
from, you know, the base of the stairs to the main floor.
Yeah.
And then my older son and we had a friend who would help us do that transition. So he would come to the hospice and help us transition to the vehicle and then back home. And then at home, he would help us get Kefa onto his chair, recliner at home. And then
Wow.
he would go and then come back and do the same thing when it was time to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was such a good friend. His
Yes.
name is Pete. He really made Kefa's last few days special by allowing him to come home and making that transition possible.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's a good friend. That's yeah, such a hard time. The cancer journey is so ugly and horrible, and that was like what was so hard is watching Luke go from big, strong, athletic guy to, not being able to take care of himself very well. I mean, our situation's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
He actually died of a blood clot, so he was still fully functioning,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, his face was caving in, the muscle wasting, all that stuff, but he was still fully functioning. But even just all of that, watching him not be able to do the things he used to do, it was just so horrible.
Yeah,
And
that's painful when you see like a healthy,
yes, healthy man.
vibrant,
Yeah,
healthy man and so incapacitated. Like,
it's
I
very
don't know.
painful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was hard. It was hard on our kids to have to
Oh yeah, to watch that.
be the
Mm-hmm.
ones to support their dad, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's the whole thing is difficult. It's just so horrible. So tell me about, so he was in hospice coming back and forth, and then tell me about the day that he died. Were you with him, or what was that like?
Yeah, so my routine was I would start my day at the hospice. So I would go home. I'd spend the night at home because I needed to get a good night's sleep. That
Yes.
I was trying not to compromise on because the chair at the hospice was just so uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
the pull-out couch, and I would do that over the maybe like on a Friday weekend, but not too much during the week. So at
Right.
least I had more energy to get through the day and be there when I'm fresh and I can spend the whole day with him without having to leave. So I'd start my day there. Then um, then I would go either go to work if I needed to go to work, and then come back and spend the evening with him and pray over him before I left.
Mm.
And every evening I would just anoint him with oil and say a prayer,
Mm.
and I'd have music play in the background while he slept, or at least in during the day. Of course, this was in between his writing. I'll tell you about his writing.
Yes.
And so on this 2 days before he passed, I had same routine. I went in, and this time the nurse called me and said, "Hey, we have to tell you something." I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" She says, "Yeah, it's not looking good. His Kefa is in his dying stages." I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what does that even mean? I mean, for me, it
Right.
was like, even though, everything was going, and I know some doctors had talked, we had been prepared.
Right.
It like no one can literally prepare you for that kind of loss,
That's true.
like especially now that was so eminent. And so she said, just get the boys out of school and let them come and spend as much time with him. We don't know how long. I was like, oh God. Like that's my heart was so broken at that point.
Yes.
And I felt like I've been fighting so hard,
Yes.
and this is what it's coming to. So I called our pastor, I called some friends, and they came. People spent the day with him. Of course, most of our family, his brother also came by from Swift Current, and most of our family was back in Kenya, some in the US, all over the world. Anyways, so some were planning to travel. Of course, we didn't know how long. We were not given
Right.
any number of hours or days. They just said it could be any time, but they didn't know when. So people sent like word messages that recorded on the phone, and I could play for him just to keep him encouraged. Because
Yeah.
by this time he was so heavily sedated,
Yeah.
he was asleep. But they said his hearing was still good, so he could hear. So we did these recordings for him. So the day they told us that, I was so torn between should I go home or should I just set up camp at this hospice
Right.
because I don't know what's going to happen. Um, a friend came from Calgary. She was with us that day and said she was going to be with the boys for the night. I thought, okay, you know what? let me just go get a night's rest and let me pray that nothing happens, because his brother was also there. And I thought, his brother is here, we don't want to be too crammed up in the room, and he'll be asleep at night. And he was asleep throughout. So I left his brother there, and again I did my night routine. I prayed over him, and I told him, please, Kefa, don't go. Just don't go. Just don't go. Don't go. Just, yeah. And in the morning, I dashed there again as fast as I could, got myself ready, dashed there, got the boys ready, but they were taking long, so I had my friend bring them. So when I got there, I was also playing the recordings for him. His brother, who had been there the whole night, I let him step out a bit to refresh himself, and we were working on cleaning Kefa because, he hadn't shaved, so I was shaving him and cleaning him up just for the day. And as, once we got him all cleaned up and everything, he just started like gasping for breath. And I'm like, what's going on? And just at that point, the boys walked in. I called the nurse. What's going on? He's like gasping for breath. And it just became obvious that he was taking his last breath. And that's how he passed, just about 10 in the morning. Yeah, but we were all there with him. The boys had come in and we were just holding him, and yeah, he kind of he just stopped breathing at that point.
It's such a like, that's a feeling you can't explain to anybody when you see a soul leave a body, or feel it. It can't be explained.
It can, and it's a memory that will never ever go. I mean, on one hand, I was grateful that he waited for us
Right.
to. I was grateful that he waited for us to come, because I don't know what I would have done if he went when I was not there. I just feel like I would have felt so guilty.
Yes.
So I feel like that was his way of saying goodbye. Just,
Yeah.
I just felt like, to me, that just brings me that comfort that he waited for us to come and be by his side.
Yeah.
When he was, when he was breathing his last breath. Yeah.
Such a hard time. So, what was it like your first, few days, weeks, months? What was life like for you as a new widow? I mean, it's just like crazy
It was a
time,
shock. I was not
right?
in.
Because you were
I didn't
thinking he was
expect
going to
it.
be healed, right? Like up until the end.
My first instinct, in fact, the day he died, and we called the pastor to come in, and the hospice, they help to make all these calls because they ask you who your pastor is. And our pastor knew he had come the day before. I was mad with God.
Yeah. A lot of people go through that.
Because for me, when he stopped breathing, that was like, all hope was gone now.
Yeah.
There's no hope for life.
Yeah.
What am I going to pray now? He's gone. At least when he's breathing, I can pray for healing. But now he's gone. What am I praying for? I just felt like God he had set me up to believe that he was going to heal him. All the words, all the promises that I got all along lined up with healing.
Right.
And so I couldn't reconcile. What does this mean? You told me you're going to heal him. This to me doesn't look like healing.
Right.
How do I even believe you now? How do I believe these promises that we hear, about healing, and yet this promise didn't come true in my life? I battled with that for quite a bit. I have to be very honest. I did.
Yeah, a lot of
I
people
battled
do.
with that. And I guess I know God is very merciful and very compassionate. He understood how I was feeling, and he himself just came and softened my heart and healed me of that. And just brought me back to himself in terms of, you can still trust me.
Right.
You can still trust me. I don't know. Yeah. Of course, I have questions why some people are healed, why some people
I
don't get
know.
healed. But that's a preserve of God, and that's what makes him God. That there's
Right.
some things we'll never understand about who he is and why he does some things the way he
Right.
does. That's what makes him God.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's such a hard journey that you've been on. Were there any like specific verses or songs that helped you through this time?
Oh, there were many. There were many, and I think the verses for me came in. Um, the verses came in different seasons of that journey,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Initially, the very first verse and what I would consider my theme verse is Isaiah 61, where Jesus, or he's speaking in the Old Testament, but he also speaks in the New
Yeah.
Testament, where he says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to proclaim good news
Yes. I
to the
love
poor." He says he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. You know, he says, he has sent me to comfort all who mourn
Mm-hmm.
and to provide for
Mm-hmm.
those who grieve in Zion. That those words just resonated with me,
Yes.
that's his mission, you know, to bind up those who are brokenhearted, to
Yes.
proclaim freedom for captives and those who are, prisoners in darkness, but more so to comfort those who mourn. He understands my
Yes. I love
mourning,
it.
and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, and to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of
Yes.
ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning,
Mm-hmm.
sadness, and the garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. In moments or in seasons of grief, there can be so much despair,
Yes.
because when hope is gone, then we're left with despair, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what Jesus comes to do, to replace that despair with hope.
Yes. Those are some of my favorite verses too. Love it.
Yeah,
Because it's
yeah,
like, especially when you go through it and you've actually received beauty for ashes. And when God has actually turned your mourning into dancing, when you've actually felt that, then it's like, wow, these
yeah.
verses are so true.
Yeah, so that became like my
Yeah.
anchor verse, that every time I felt like I'm so broken, I
Yeah.
would say, "This Jesus, this is what you said you're coming to do. Heal my broken heart. Heal our boys.
Yes.
Heal the boys. Their hearts are so broken.
Mm-hmm.
Comfort us, you know. Just take away the spirit of despair. Give us a spirit of hope in the midst of all this pain." And then other verses that came along the way, especially for me, one of the challenges was parenting solo at this
Yes.
point,
Oh, yes.
and parenting, young men, young
Mm-hmm.
boys, transitioning to them to adult. I was like, how do I
Yes.
do this? Kefa was so good at this. He connected well with the boys. Like, it's not that I didn't connect well, but he did such a good job, and I worried whether I'm gonna be able to do this.
Right.
And one verse that God gave me, I don't even know how this verse. I never knew it was in the Bible.
Uh-huh.
From Jeremiah 49, verse 11, it says, "Leave your fatherless children. I will keep them alive.
Wow. I've
You
never.
widows too can depend on me." I said, okay, okay, I
That's
surrender. Okay.
amazing. I haven't heard that verse before,
I
and I think
know,
all the widows need to hear that. That's
I know.
amazing.
So every time I got concerned about my kids, I was like, okay, God, I just had God say, "Leave the fatherless children to me. I will keep them alive." And he said, Christine, it's not your job to keep these kids alive. It's my job. I'm their father now, you
Wow.
know. And he says, all you need to do is depend on me. You widows too can depend on me. That's what it says.
Oh my
Another verse
goodness.
that I found
Amazing.
very, very encouraging that has kept me going when I felt, of course, being so new in Canada and having to navigate this, significant
Right.
loss and adversity. I didn't have very many family members around me. And so the verse from Psalms 146, verse 9, it says, the Lord watches over the foreigner, he sustains the fatherless and the widow. I was like, okay, God, thank you, because
Yes.
I'm a foreigner in this land. And, just like, I just felt those words comforting me
Yeah.
that he watches over us.
Yes.
When I faced opposition, I would, he gave me the word from Psalm 68, verse 5. It says, a father to the fatherless, a
Yes.
defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling. And that also just kept me going in the face of things that I had to battle with that were challenging. And yeah,
So good. Those
yeah.
are,
Then
yeah.
around August 2021, that is what I consider, and I don't know whether everyone goes through this, but I feel like, and I don't know, Michelle, if you did go through this, maybe you can tell me, is that for me, this was my turning point in my grief journey. The point where God just switched things around to take me in a different direction as far as beginning my active healing and beginning to rebuild my life.
Yeah.
And I had listened to a sermon, I think it was by T.D. Jakes, and he was preaching
Love him.
about Samuel, when Samuel was told to go and anoint David. And it was like God had told Samuel, you've been mourning for Saul enough. Now stop mourning. Like, now pick up your oil and go and anoint David. Go to the house of Jesse.
Yeah.
And it's in the verse came to me from Jeremiah 31, verse 3 and 5, where it says, the Lord appeared to us, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. I will build you up again.
So
And
good.
you, Virgin Israel, you will be rebuilt. And I would put my name there. I just
I love
owned
it.
this verse, and I would say, God will build you up again. You, Christine, you will be rebuilt.
So
Again, you will take up your timbrels and go out to dance with the joyful. Again, you will plant vineyards in the hills of Samaria and blah, 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 and you will enjoy your fruit and all that good stuff.
I love it.
So that to me was just a turning point,
Yeah.
and I felt like God was saying, it wasn't like stop mourning, but just like, I want to take you to another level now, where I want to start actively rebuilding your life, because it's so easy for grief to cripple us and
Yeah.
to make us feel like everything is gone. Our lives are shattered,
Right.
and it's all lost, But that's not how God sees it. As much as it feels that way, He doesn't just leave us shattered and broken.
Right.
As He binds up our broken hearts, He starts rebuilding us so that we can re-engage in life in a new way.
It's so true. Oh, these verses are so powerful. I'm excited for the widows listening to really go to these verses and read them for themselves and see, wow, God really loves the widows and fatherless. In fact, 2 days ago, my son was in my room talking, and he was 12 when his dad died, and he's 17 now. And we
Oh,
were just talking about all these things about his dad. And then I said, did you know that the Bible talks so much about widows and fatherless? Like, that's us. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, like God wants to take care of widows and fatherless. Like, it's so
yeah,
special. And I've
yeah,
seen it time and time again in my life and other people's lives. And you go from that place of feeling like you can't survive, you're not
Yeah.
going to make it through, to then you get to this place. I mean, I remember literally dancing around in my house. Like, I'm feeling dancing now. I'm not in the mourning place. Like, I'm dancing. And I want that
Mm-hmm.
for every listener. I want
Yeah.
them to get to that place, because
Yeah.
there's nothing like it. Like, you
Yeah.
can't explain. So I don't feel like I have like a moment when that happened, but very similar. I had a moment when I was at a grief retreat,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a long story. I've explained all of it before to my listeners, but I'll just give like a really quick version that everything changed into my mind. It was like 2 months after Luke died. And I'm like, am I being punished? Blah, blah, blah. And then God said to me, I heard him. There was a whole vision. He was giving me a crown. It was this whole thing. And he's like, I chose you. I chose you to be Luke's wife. Like, this is a privilege. You got to do this. And it
Wow.
changed everything. And so that's what I try to share with people, is like, you were chosen. Out of all the
Wow.
people in the world, you were chosen to be your husband's wife, or your
Wow.
wife's husband, whoever I'm talking to. And this is not an accident. And God's proud
Mm-hmm.
of you, because he also said that in my vision. I'm proud of me. He gave me a crown. It was this whole beautiful thing.
Oh,
And so I think
wow.
that's when it changed in me, like,
Yeah.
of like this, I'm not being punished. It's not because I did something wrong. And I do hear that from a lot of widows. Am I being punished? No, definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
We live in a fallen, sinful world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just this much. We're going to go to eternity and have forever. We're going to be with our loved ones, and
Absolutely.
this is just
Yeah.
such a short time that
Yeah.
can feel so big. So I want to talk about, you mentioned real briefly, and we talked a little before, about your husband's book. Tell us what that's about.
Oh, yeah. So Kefa started up writing a book just around the end of August. He just had this strong urge, desire to document his life,
I love that.
and nobody could stop him.
Yeah.
Nobody could stop him. So he wanted to document his life, and so we rallied around him to support him do this. And it's a memoir that captures his life from of course early childhood to all through growing up in rural Kenya. He was born in the western side of Kenya, but grew up mostly in Nairobi. So he takes us through his early childhood,
Wow.
going to school, moving to Nairobi, going to school, and his, of course, high school, elementary, high school, university, and then
Wow.
career. He takes us through
Oh,
marriage, courting to yours truly, and then of course parenting with the boys. He gives us a glimpse into what that looks like, of course
so
capturing key values in his life around family, love, faith, hope. He talks about ministry in church as well, serving God, giving his life to God, and just a place that God had in his life. And then he now talks about his of course that diagnosis, that horrible
right.
diagnosis. And he talks about some of the challenges that posed to him, and just how this, brought him so close to, just the reality of his mortality. And yeah, what that
Wow.
looks like. So he he did not finish the book, or rather he finished the book to the extent that he could finish.
Yeah.
He wanted this book done before Christmas of 2018. And by this time, his left arm was completely like
Mm.
done. It could not move, it could not type. So I was doing most of the typing. We had another friend who was a writer who was helping us as well. And so he helped us get at least the initial manuscript on Word, on Kobo, on
Yeah, I know
the
what that
Kobo
is.
platform, and at least just something that Kefa could feel, okay, we've done something,
I love
you know.
it.
But Kefa was like, no, 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 this is not enough. We still want, and he would, when we left him, when I would leave him in the hospice, he would be on his laptop
Oh,
searching for publishers all over.
I
And
love
the first
it.
thing I got, when I got there, he'd be like, give me my credit card. I want to pay for this. Like, I need to get I need to get this book published. So like, no, wait, we have to know what you're doing here. Don't just pay anybody anything. So obviously we couldn't get the book published because by this time people had shut down for Christmas.
Yeah.
And, you know, people were coming back in the new year. Things had slowed down. So we kind of told him, okay, since it's already on Kobo, we'll work on it in the new year when everyone comes back to work and get it published. And so unfortunately, Kefa died on the 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't get to do that. So after he passed away, I took it on myself. I took it upon myself to bring his dream come true, to make his dream come true.
I love it.
So I got the manuscript. I completed the last two. I wrote the last two chapters, which talk about how he eventually passed, and just some tributes to him. And I got the book published posthumously. So that's his book.
My Life, My Legacy. I am going to get this book. I cannot wait to read it.
So
and that's available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. That's My Life, My Legacy, Turning the Unexpected into a Lifetime of Cherished Memories.
What a gift for your kids to have a book their dad wrote about his life. That is such a gift for you, for everyone. I can't wait to read. He sounds like an amazing man, so I want to read all about him.
And because we loved pictures, it has a lot of pictures.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so getting that book.
That gives you a picture, a glimpse of that's him and the boys. Like from the word go, he was always with them doing sports and doing everything. So it has all those pictures that you can put, faces to who he's talking about in his life.
And we'll put a link in the show notes for people who want to just click on the link as well. But that looks absolutely amazing. I can't wait to read it. It's just everything you've told me. I'm like, I want to know more about him.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to read his book. So tell us what else you've done with your life, because I know you are into helping people and you've developed a whole bunch of cool things. So tell us, what you're doing now, because you are helping lots of people. So what do you do now?
Yeah. So, of course, that book got me into the world of writing and publishing. So it did help me in my grief.
Yes.
It helped me process my grief. It brought me face to face with, the reality of my loss. And that was really one very, very special thing. So I started also writing my book.
Awesome.
I'm not done yet, but I'm getting there. So when it's done,
is it your story? Is that what yours is?
Yeah, the one I'm writing is my story. It is my story with just not a memoir this time, but my story with grief, my journey with grief.
I can't wait to read that too.
Yeah. Then, of course, I moved my family from Medicine Hat to Calgary after Kefa passed and after John graduated high school. So he was coming to the university here in Calgary, and I didn't want us to be separated. So I moved us all. And that was the time I was completing the book. And I went back now to do my master's. Finally started my master's online. COVID hit. And so that was just the right time to start. And so that's what I was busy doing. And at the same time, because as I mentioned, we had served with Kefa, doing a lot of premarital classes, facilitating all those. I thought, okay, I felt like God was saying, now this is your time to develop your own grief class that you can also take people through.
Yes, I love it.
Because you have the facilitation skills, you have the training. And so that's what I did. I developed a course, 10-week class, and I started taking people through that. And that to me was just a way of just giving back and finding healing by just supporting other people going through grief.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm bringing in the reason why I chose to do that, and I know there are many programs out there. I also did Grief Share myself when I was in Medicine Hat, and there are so many others online. I decided to do this because I could incorporate faith,
Yeah.
the Word of God, as part of what we need in our healing.
Mm-hmm.
But I could also incorporate aspects of, from my professional background as a counselor,
Yeah.
things that we use in helping clients heal, some where there's been trauma, depression, anxiety. I bring in some of those tools that we can use to help people get through some of these challenges during grief,
Right.
some mindfulness activities, and just ways to manage anxiety, because there are many people going through grief do experience anxiety
Yeah.
and sometimes depression. And
Mm-hmm.
so I bring in that some CBT, cognitive
Mm-hmm.
behavioral therapy. So I incorporate all that
I love it.
into my class. Yeah.
So is that something like a listener could sign up for? Like, do you have a link for that, or is that like, is it online?
It's online, and I do it in a coaching capacity, because that then allows me to
I love it.
see people all over the world. Of course, I have a counseling practice here in
Yes.
Calgary that allows me to only, see people in a
Right.
professional capacity as a counselor,
Uh-huh.
as a psychologist here in Calgary. But working with widows is something God has put in my heart,
Yes.
and so that I don't limit it to a counseling capacity. I use my coaching practice to do that.
Perfect.
And you'll find me under 3RG coaching. 3RG means rest, recover,
Ooh,
rebuild, and grow.
I love
That's the
that.
model that God gave me for working with women going through grief. Is that the first thing you want to do is rest.
Mm,
Then you want to start recovering, and then you want to rebuild
so
and then
good.
grow. So that's
Yes.
where 3RG coaching
Well,
comes
hopefully you
in.
could give me a link that I'll put in the show notes. So if people want to connect
Absolutely.
with you directly about that, they
Yeah.
can. This
Yeah. Yeah.
sounds absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. And I can see that God has really restored your joy, and he's doing big things with you. And it's so beautiful. Like, my favorite thing is watching like widows who've been through all this, then they go on to help other people. And it's like, then our nothing's wasted. We're able to take what we've been through and help other people.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to announce that you are our first Widow Goals leader in Canada. So we just talked about that today. So thank you
Yeah.
for volunteering. So you're going to be hosting groups in Calgary, which is so
Mm-hmm.
exciting, and being part of
Mm-hmm.
our team. So thank you for that. That's amazing. So a couple other questions before we go. What advice would you give to a brand new widow? I mean, there's so much, but if you had to choose,
There's so,
so
so
much.
much. Yeah. There's so much. If I could just narrow it down to 3 points,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the first thing is allow yourself to grieve.
Yes.
Grief, of course, is can be painful for many people, and we nobody likes pain. We like
Right.
to run away from pain. But I say allow yourself to grieve, allow yourself to mourn. Mourning and grieving are two different things. Mourning is an outward expression of our grief.
Right.
Grief is a normal reaction to loss.
I never knew the difference there. That's very good to understand it.
Yeah, there is a difference, and so it's okay to grieve. It's okay to mourn. Right? So mourning is just the outward expression of that grief.
Oh, so good.
Why? Because even the Bible says, the wise Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, that there is a time for everything, a time to
Yes.
be born and a time to die, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. The season of when we get into a time of grief, we're in a season of grief. Just like seasons, they don't last forever.
Yeah.
And so I say, well, if you find yourself in that season of grief, embrace it. Allow yourself to go through it. Let yourself allow yourself to feel the emotions that come with it. Because again, like I said, people run away from pain. They don't want to cry. They don't want to feel sad. And it's okay. We grieve. We feel sad because we lost somebody significant. It was not
Right.
just some random person
Right.
on the street. This was someone we loved, right?
Right.
And so understand what you're going through. Allow yourself to feel it, because if you don't feel it, you can't heal it.
Exactly. In fact, my listeners know well. I say a phrase all the time: what we feel, God can heal. And to let yourself
Absolutely.
feel. It came from my grief counselor, and I used to say, what we feel, I can heal, or we can heal. What we feel, we can heal. And then I felt like
Yes,
God told me one time, no, 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 it's what we feel, God can heal. And so that's
absolutely.
what I say all the time, is let yourself feel it. Like, you have to go
Absolutely.
through the grief or you're never going to heal. That's why I'll run across widows 10 years down the road, still in the same place, because they never felt it. They always stopped it. They try to keep busy. They try to do all the things to not feel,
Hmm.
but they're still going to have to deal with it. And so that's such good advice.
Yeah. If you run away from it, guess what? It will catch up with you.
Yep.
It will catch up with you. Even if it's 10 years down the road,
That's
it will
right.
catch up with you.
Yes.
So, and
That's good.
again, grief, one thing I always tell people is that grief is manifested in different domains,
Mm-hmm. That's true.
emotionally, physically, behaviorally, spiritually, and even cognitively. So it's important to understand how grief is showing up in those different domains of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
Because then if you don't understand that, then you also don't know you don't know how to heal it.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah. Or
So
how
good.
God can heal it.
Yes.
Borrowed from Michelle.
Yes. So, also another question: what has been the most challenging thing about being widowed?
Um, the one of them, of course, as I mentioned, it's parenting solo.
Yes. I hear you.
Yeah, Kefa was a great dad, a great support, and so having to take on that role, especially for the boys, I just have found it so challenging, and I guess that's where I've been tried the most. But it's and I have to keep reminding myself it's okay. God is in control. He's gonna take these boys. He's gonna take care of them, right? But still having to do all those things that
Mm-hmm.
Kefa would have done. He taught Jonathan how to drive. That was fine. But I had to do that with Matthew.
Yes.
And I literally could
Ugh.
not. I had to take him to driving school. But, like transitioning them to adulthood,
So
some of those
hard.
things are so hard to do when they had their dad who could do that
Right.
so easily for them. And then, of course, yeah, just doing life without him, it has
Yeah.
been like we did everything, literally everything
Yeah.
together. We were hardly ever apart for like, so he helped with house stuff, chores,
Right.
cooking, all that. And decision making, he made that so much easier for me. And now I have to do all that alone. That for me has been very
Oh,
challenging.
yeah. 'Cause I can relate, because my kids were 12, 14, and 16, so very similar ages and growing up. And, I am remarried now, but that's not their dad. And there's
Hmm.
never going to be, I mean, I definitely still grieve over that. Like, there's never going to be someone that loves them as much as we do. Like, the
Hmm.
parents love them to that depth, and to make decisions and all the things. It's just like, so many times. And even my oldest, he's 20 now, and not that long ago he said, I wish, no offense to you, but I wish daddy was here, because I want to talk to him now that I'm an adult. Like, I want to talk
I
to
know,
him.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And have
yeah,
those adult conversations and ask him for
yeah,
advice and
yeah.
all the things. And I hate that they can't do that. That is, oh, it so hurts.
I know that's what, and even watching them in pain and you can't take away their pain,
Oh, I know.
that again is so hard.
Yes,
Like I can deal with my pain, but I want to take away their pain, and yet they have to go through this
They
themselves,
do,
you
because
know,
they're not
and
going to heal unless they go through it.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah. But another thing I was going to add
Yeah.
about us for other widows, I had said the first thing would be allow yourself to grieve. The
Yes.
second thing I wanted to say was surround yourself with good supports.
Yes.
Um,
So good.
we were not created for isolation. We are created for connection, and grief can be very isolating.
Mm-hmm.
Many times you'll hear widows say, "I just don't want to be around anybody," you
Yeah.
know. But that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. I know it's okay for a season, I
Yeah.
mean, for a few days, but not for too long. You know,
Right.
um, find the right supports. You know, I always say focus, like have natural supports, which are like friends and family,
Yes.
have professional supports,
True.
which include like therapists,
Yep.
doctors, and have informal supports, which are like the social groups on Facebook
Yes.
or any
Yes.
other community groups, right?
Uh-huh.
All those, God uses those to bring healing in
Yes,
our
he
lives,
does. He does. Yeah. I
right?
think it's all of those. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah. And then the last piece around that is embrace healing. You know how you said some women remain stuck where they were
Yes. Yes.
10 years down the road?
Yes.
We got to get to a point where we are intentional about getting well and recovering from our grief.
Yes. That's true.
And I know it's not easy, but it is possible, because again, what we run away from, David Kessler says, is what we run away from pursues us,
Mm.
but what we face transforms us. And
That's good.
so grief can be a very transformative experience
Mm-hmm.
if we allow it to do that for us. Because some things, like you look at you starting this podcast. Would you have done that if it was not for
Mm-mm.
your experience
No.
having lost Luke? Even though that's not something we can say we wanted,
Right.
but God has turned that into something beautiful,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And so healing is a choice that we make.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And as we make that healing, God works. As we make that choice, God does the healing. And we can make something beautiful out of our lives.
Yes.
I love the way David says um, in in Psalms. I think he says in Psalms 84, verse 6 and 7. Um, he says, "As they pass through the valley of
Mm.
Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion." And David was saying, just like he said in Psalms 23, when we go through the valley of the shadow of death, those valleys, we're not meant to stay in the valley.
Right.
We're just going through. But even in those valleys, we can make them places of refreshing,
Yes.
places that make our lives stronger and enrich us and make us transform us into something so beautiful and
So
something
true.
so different. Some transform us into somebody beautiful, but
Yes.
make us stronger, find meaning and purpose in who God has called us to be.
Mm. So good. I love it. You have so much wisdom to share, and it's just amazing to see the smile on your face after knowing the depths of what you went through and just seeing where God's taking you now. It's beautiful. So I would love to close in prayer and pray for you. So
Thank you.
you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Michelle.
You're welcome. God, I just thank you so much for Christine. Thank you for her reaching out to me and wanting to share her story to help other people. I just pray blessings and peace over her and her boys, that you continue to give them joy and continue to heal the broken parts in their hearts. And I pray blessings over Christine's ministry with widows and all the people that she's helping through grief, with her classes she created, her coaching, her counseling. I just pray that you continue to give her what she needs every single day, give her her daily bread, and give her the peace that passes all understanding. And I also pray for everyone listening today. God, we just pray that they can really embrace these verses, your words about how you want to turn our mourning into dancing and make beauty from our ashes. And I just pray they can really hold on to those verses if they're in that place of needing, waiting on that, and they're in that new place of brokenness, God, that you will just give them comfort today. Use Christine's words, use your words, use my words to help them as they go about their day, to know that it's not always going to feel as bad as it does in the beginning. We just thank you for technology to be able to reach people all around the world. We just thank you so much for all you've done. Amen.
Amen.
Well, if you like this podcast, give it a little bing, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. A couple other things for the listeners. If you want to be a guest, there's an application in the show notes. We'd love to hear your story. Also, if you would like to be a Widow Goals leader, which we did a whole episode on that, we'd love to have you. It's just finding a place once a month to get people together. We have a training page with videos and everything you need to know to become a leader. So, and we'd also love to have you join us on our Facebook page. I think that's all the announcements. So, Christine, thank you so much. It was amazing getting to hear your full story, and I'm excited for what God's going to continue to do. And as you step up to be a Widow Goals leader, I'll get to keep working with you, which will be so fun. And just thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And all blessings to every widow out there.
Yes.
You're not alone.
That's
we can
true.
do this together.
That's right. All right, listeners, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Widowed Too Soon with Michelle Bader Ebersole. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, rate and review. And we'd also love for you to join our Widowed Too Soon community on Facebook. See you next time.